So in this video, we're going to be talking about the vital force theory, and this video essentially marks the beginning of the organic chemistry lectures, a series of organic chemistry videos. So in order to understand the fundamentals of organic chemistry, the reactions, the mechanisms, the preparations of various compounds, we have to first just get to know the gist of organic chemistry, its history, technically speaking, more about its history. And yeah, and vital force theory is one of the most essential elements in the founding of organic chemistry. So it involves the contribution of the works of various scientists, chemists, many people in various fields. And vital force theory is actually a very it's actually a good place to start talking about organic chemistry, because vital force theory actually gives us a sense or a definition of what an organic compound actually is, and the sort of the characteristics of an organic compound. So because of the fact that vital force theory is actually not true, it was debunked later on. So we can sort of first understand why it can be plausible, why it could be true, and try to understand why it was later on debunked, and sort of just get the gist of what an organic compound is. And once you understand what an organic compound is, it makes it more simple for me to explain uh, the properties, or it would be very easy for me to explain the properties of various compounds and the general criteria of organic chemistry. So let's just begin with this without going too much into detail. And it's a very easy concept. It's not even, it doesn't actually deserve a video of its own, but still, for the sake of limiting the time for each, like having less time for each video, it's way better to do it. So vital force theory was so it all begins from the 1780s. So you have 1780s, 1790s, in you would say late medieval Europe, and even in the US. Chemists, they started beginning to compare various organic compounds, inorganic compounds. You have Antoine de Lavoisier, who was a French chemist, and he was also relatively uh, known, or he was relatively involved at that timeline. So you have 1780s, 1790s, chemists, they start comparing organic compounds, inorganic compounds, because they realize that you can classify compounds into organic and inorganic because of various physical features, right? So I'm just going to write that down. 1780. You have chemists around the world who start comparing organic and inorganic compounds. Right. So this happens at that time. So they just compare. What do they get? The results. The results that they get is that organic compounds originate from living organisms. So this is what they essentially conclude from all of their observation, their long time observation of organic compounds, and they finally state that the key difference between an organic compound and an inorganic compound is that an organic compound is essentially the constituent of living beings. It constitutes what a living organism, the sort of the anatomy and the structure of a living organism, while its inorganic compounds do not. So they stated that, and I'm just gonna write in brief. They stated that organic compounds come from organisms. Organic originates from organisms, right? Organic and organism. So originates from, yeah, right. And then uh, so an inorganic, obviously, if I say that organic originates from organisms, uh, inorganic would mean the opposite, obviously. And then comes 1809. So then this is the first event. You can just say this is like the first major event in the 18th century, 19th century the timeline, the founding of organic chemistry, if I may. And then you have 1809, and then you have a Swedish chemist, this young man over here, this young man over here, John Jacob Berzelius. And Berzelius, he proposed, you know, the vital force theory, which over here stated the vital force theory. And now things get a bit interesting in later on. So the vital force theory, vital force theory is proposed by this individual over here, this chemist. Now, what does the vital force theory actually state? What is the postulate of the theory? So it states that organic compounds cannot be prepared artificially, or in other words, they can only be prepared naturally, right? Why? Because various scientists around the world have concluded that uh, organic compounds, they originate from organisms, right? When you already make this comparison, when you already give this detail over here, it's pretty essential. I mean, it's pretty logical that organic compounds would not be prepared cannot be prepared from uh like artificial processes or in laboratories and stuff like that. So yeah, so we're sort of understanding why and how this theory actually makes sense, and later on we'll actually come and try to debunk it ourselves so that we sort of get the best understanding of this theory. So he states that, and I'll just write this all in red. So the vital force theory, organic compounds cannot be synthesized or prepared, sorry, prep artificially, right? This is the first part of the vital force theory. So this is part A. Then you have part B, and part B states that it talks more about this thing, this vital force, right? The vital force in vital force theory comes from part B, which is technically, according to Berzelius, it's a force, a sort of godlike spiritual invisible force that at the molecular level is responsible for forming organic compounds. And the reason only organic compounds are present or are are present in organisms is because he states that, or he stated that, the vital force theory is only or sorry the vital force is only present in organisms, living organisms. So why can they not be prepared artificially? Because, or why can they only be prepared naturally? Because only living organisms contain this invisible organisms, they contain this vital force, the vital force. So anything that's not living technically doesn't possess the vital force, according to Berzelius. So that's why, you can't technically synthesize or artificially maneuver some technique that can, extract some sort of organic compound from that. So yeah, so this is technically, this whole red part is the vital force theory, stated, you know, word to word. And now we'll sort of understand how this theory was rejected, and from what parameter was this theory rejected, and from what front, whoever was rejecting it, from what front was he rejecting it. So now you have the third part, third major event in the founding of organic chemistry. And here we go. Here is the rejection. So here is a proposal over here, and here's a rejection of the proposal. So you have this young man over here. Oh, he's not that young, but you have this man over here, uh, Frederick Wohler, and in 1823, so 1823, Frederick Wohler comes up and says that, you know what, uh, I just synthesized an organic compound for the first time in my lab, right, from an inorganic compound. So he literally just comes up to the public and he says that, hey guys, I have done the inevitable. I have technically just done something that goes against the vital force theory that Berzelius proposed, which is I synthesized an organic compound from an inorganic reactant, right? What was that organic compound? This this compound. And this actually is a urea in its condensed form. So if you want to write urea in its expanded notation, it would be sort of NH, and that's a carbon over there at that vertex. There's a double bond. So this is urea, this whole thing over here. This is the expanded form of urea, right? So urea, okay. So yeah, so Wohler, he says that he does that, right? He does that reaction. So the reaction, and I'll just write that down. The reaction is he synthesizes ammonium cyanate. So ammonium cyanate, which is NH4 ammonium, and then you have cyanate, which is CNO. He heats it and he sort of synthesizes what? Urea, right? So NH2CO, right? This is literally just the same thing. NH2CO and NH2 again. So NH2, right? And so he just heats it up, right? So he heats that mixture of reactants of ammonium cyanate. And this famous equation over here, is called Wohler's synthesis. The infamous equation that disproves the vital force theory firsthand. Wohler's synthesis. Right. So the reason why Wohler's synthesis is essential is because what Frederick Wohler saw firsthand or did is that he essentially, disproved the main essence of what the vital force theory is based on, which states that, and I'll just scroll up, it states that organic compounds cannot be prepared artificially. Guess what? He just did it. He just prepared it artificially in a lab. And now, from Frederick Wohler in 1823, all the way to today, you have various organic compounds that are constantly being engineered in ways, in various complex and simple mechanisms, uh, constantly, right? Like the entire petrochemical industry is based upon the reconfiguration, the recombination of various molecules within organic compounds, and the release of certain molecules, the addition, the substitution, the elimination, of various compounds and various atoms and stuff like that. So Wohler's synthesis over here marks the beginning of the era of research, or the era of you can say research and engineering of organic chemistry, right? From then on, you have the crux, the essentials laid down, the rules, the conventions, all the mechanisms, the hypothetical mechanisms put in place, which explains a lot about the molecular spectrum of this universe. So after Wohler's synthesis, and now here's just a few additional evidences. So in case you're not in case you're an individual who is not happy with just one reaction disproving an entire theory, which was devised by the infamous scientist Berzelius. Here are a few more evidences. So this is number 3, and then you have 4. So you have come up 1815, and you have an individual or a scientist, Colby, who synthesized acetic acid. So he synthesized acetic acid from, actually I should write it the other way. He synthesized acetic acid from an inorganic compound. So he got an inorganic compound, performed a chemical reaction, and one of the products was acetic acid. So again, disproved the vital force theory. And then you have 1856, right? So that's now a few tens of years pass by, and then you have Berthellet, or Berthellet, who synthesized methane from another inorganic source. So an inorganic source, and he synthesized methane, or let me just write this as methane, right? And so these are just a few more evidences of the debunking of the theory of vital force theory, right? But still, right, every theory that's put in place initially helps us in ways that we later on come up, like that helps us in ways later on, right? If it wasn't for vital force theory, we wouldn't have provided the essential crux of we wouldn't have a proper foundation of the beginning of organic chemistry, understanding, answering the major questions in this field, right? So thanks to vital force theory, thanks to vital force theory's proposition and also its rejection, we have come a long way through organic chemistry. And over these videos, I really encourage and I really hope that you would also get that feel that you're actually back in that timeline doing those various mechanisms, researching and discovering various places, right? So just join me and we'll move on together in this series of organic chemistry videos. We'll start out with the basics and we'll end up attacking a lot of complex topics within organic chemistry, and it'll be an amazing experience, obviously, because organic chemistry is literally the first thing that someone thinks of when they think of chemistry in general.